Okay, so everybody, I am really excited to bring Summer Bock to you today. She is a fermentationist, and we'll let you explain that trademarked word when you get started. The founder of Guts and Glory, an online company that makes gut healing accessible and enjoyable. Her practice is based on the premise that good health starts in the gut. She is a trained herbalist with a background in microbiology, which she'll have to explain what that is for some of our people as well. Summer is a master at the why behind making habit changes and clears up the confusion about probiotics, fermented foods, which there is a lot of confusion. There are some great questions for you today on that. And her programs include the Probiotic Power Cleanse, Gut Rebuilding, and the Fermentationist Certification Program. And you can learn more about her at summerbock.com, which I'll put in the chat box in just a moment. And just wanted to say thank you so much again, Summer, for being with us today. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, but wanted to let you go ahead and tell a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the fermentationist and the fermenting business.
For sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Summer Bock. I'm really excited to be here because my favorite group of people to talk to are nutrition nerds. And I'm assuming that most people here would describe themselves as a nutrition nerd. So this is going to be fun. So for me, the way it all got started is that I was really, really sick. And I was struggling with multiple chemical sensitivity. I had unexplained rashes. I would end up sometimes I've ended up at the emergency room with like hives all over my neck in a full-blown panic attack. And because my adrenaline was pumping so hard to counterbalance all the histamine, and I was given epinephrine.
Oh gosh.
Which like turned my panic attack into like, I felt like, have you ever seen Pulp Fiction?
Yes.
You know, when she gets that adrenaline shot in her heart, I can't watch that scene because that's what it felt. It really felt like that. It was, and then they gave it to me and they're like, well, you know, I think we gave you too much. We're going to have to sit here and observe you for the next hour while I'm literally shaking like this. I mean, it was a nightmare. And so I used to wake up in the middle of the night with panic attacks. I had so many food sensitivities. There was only 30 foods that I could really count on as foods that I wouldn't have a reaction to.
Okay.
Which made me feel like I might starve. You know, like, great, I'm going to like not be able to eat food someday. Fantastic. That's not terrifying at all. Mm-hmm. And I had, you know, just like general anxiety as well. Then I had environmental allergies. So my eyes would actually swell so big and my nose was running. I was itchy. I was so uncomfortable and bloated, food cravings like nobody's business. And yeah, I mean, I was miserable. I'll be honest, I was miserable.
How long did you deal with all of those things happening before you were like, okay, this isn't the normal grass allergy? Or
yeah. Well, I think it was interestingly there was two things that sort of triggered my awareness. One was that I did a cleanse while I was studying herbal medicine. And in that cleanse, I felt like a blanket got taken out of my brain because I looked around, everything was clear, crisp, beautiful, sparkling. I felt happy. I felt relaxed and calm for the first time in my life. Mm-hmm. And I was 21.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's how normal people feel and function. I get it. And so that was kind of a moment when I realized I had been sick my whole life with a complete lack of awareness of that I was even sick. I didn't know before that moment. So that was bizarre.
Because you didn't know what normal really felt like, because you'd been living in a sick body for so long, right?
Yeah, it was like my sister when we discovered she was lactose intolerant when she was like 10. She didn't know that having diarrhea after drinking milk wasn't what everybody experienced. So, you know, there's a lot of people, like I share that story because that's a really crucial. So many people that we know in our lives are having that experience right now.
Yes. Yes.
You know? And that's, I think that's the difference between us and them is a lot of times we've had an awakening. You know, we've had a moment where we realize like that we're settling for subpar health. So that was a moment. And then from that point forward, I actually continued to get more stressed out. So stress played a role. And then that newfound awareness really accentuated a lot of what I was experiencing. I began noticing more and more how many parts of my life weren't working well. So there was, I mean, I want to say I was experiencing this my whole life because I've had these symptoms throughout my life, but there was a period of about, let's see, there was like 5 years where it was really bad, like severe, you know, what I would categorize as severe, where I was pretty obsessed with it, where I was having anxiety every time I put any food in my mouth whatsoever.
Wow.
Because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I would get laid out. I didn't know if I'd be wheezing the next second. I didn't know how my night would go. I mean, it was miserable. So there was a solid 5 years where it was horrible. And then I really started to understand what to do and get better. Like as an herbalist, I was using herbs, right? I'm like, let me take herbs for my liver to help clear up my skin. I'm going to take herbs for my digestion to help with the bloating. I'm going to take herbs for my adrenals because I'm so exhausted all the time. I'm going to take herbs from allergies, for histamine, for, you know, like I was taking so many herbs for all the different systems in my body. And then I went to my doctor, who at this point I was working with her patients and health coaching her patients. And I walk in there and I'm like crying and my nose is running and I'm swollen and itchy. And she's like, so what are you doing here?
Wow.
And I'm like, well, you know, I need some help. And she's like, listen, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to write you a prescription. You're not going to fill it. I don't think it's going to do anything anyway. You know more about this than I do. What are you doing here?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so that was kind of my moment where I went home and I was like, all right, no one's going to save me. I've got to take responsibility for my own health. And from that point forward, I really did. And I did a little bit more research. I mean, we're talking like, this is like 2000, this was probably like 2007 at this point. And I had done a lot of work to heal my body at this point, but there was still so many pieces that weren't working, and like allergies would flare up out of nowhere. I didn't know why. And, you know, I realized at that point through some of the research that, okay, maybe this could all be connected to the gut. So I started just focusing on my gut. I got rid of all the supplements. I stopped taking all the herbs. I only focused on gut health at that point. And that's when I started to see a change. I was taking probiotics. I saw a big change. I asked myself, what's the whole food version of probiotics? Because if you're trained as an herbalist, you want to know, how did your ancestors get probiotics in their body?
Yes.
You know, we don't, you know, how did they get? They didn't take a little pill. I know they didn't take a little pill.
No, they didn't take a pill. And I love that, because that's one thing, like, and I, you know, when you kind of try to not dumb it down, because I really hate that, but kind of when you're trying to bring it down to the level of a normal person and explain to them what a probiotic is and how come it, you know, it's important that we have them. It's like my father-in-law. He's a good example. He's a good old Southern boy. He's in his 70s. He eats crystal and comes over to my house with a crystal coffee cup, and had cancer, doesn't understand, you know, everything that I do. And he said, well, I don't understand why today we have to take these things, called them probiotics. These, you know, we're from Tennessee. And so are you, right? Yeah. And I said, well, let me try to explain it to you. Do you remember when you were little and you would go out in your mom's garden and she'd be out there and she'd be working in the garden and have her apron on? She might pull a carrot out and wipe it on her apron and eat it, like in the middle of the day kind of thing. Well, we can't do that anymore because our soil is contaminated. I mean, you know, so I went into that explanation to him, and it brought it to him. He understood it better, to understand that probiotics can come from our soil, but not, you know, not the same way that they used to. So I like to take people further back, you know, several generations back, and remind them that life is not the same these days, right?
It's very different. Absolutely. And so that when I asked myself that question, I posed that question, I began to look for the answer, and that's when fermented foods popped up. They are the whole food version of probiotics. That's how my ancestors got it. And I started making fermented foods, making excessive amounts of fermented foods, and selling them in my fridge in my garage to my roommates' friends and things like that. And I actually started a sauerkraut company kind of on the side while I was doing health coaching, and kind of did both for about 7 years. I just sold my sauerkraut company a couple of years ago. Okay. And just focus on, you know, teaching people how to make fermented foods and heal their gut. And that was, you know, making the fermented foods really was an incredible moment for me, because I got more gains in my health from eating fermented foods than I did from taking the probiotics.
Okay. And that's going to lead me to one of my questions that I actually had for you.
Okay.
So talk to us a little bit about that, about the, tell us the difference between the two, besides the fact that one is food and one is in a little pill. But, what are your thoughts about the fact that if someone is eating fermented foods regularly, should they take a probiotic? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I have, it depends on the individual, really. When I'm working with my clients who are pretty depleted and, they don't have enough nutritional stores, their gut microbiome is totally in a disarray, I will recommend probiotics and fermented foods.
Okay.
If somebody can't tolerate either one of them for some reason, whether they're having a reaction or not, which it happens. I mean, I actually end up seeing a lot of histamine people, like people who have histamine issues, because fermented foods have a lot of histamines in them. Mm-hmm. So if anybody has a histamine issue, that fermented foods can sometimes trigger it.
Yes.
So I let people gravitate toward the one that seems to work for them the best. However, in my opinion, in terms of like what I believe, if people were healthy, what should be happening, I think that people would not need to rely on probiotic pills. Because if you look at, like the Hadza or the people of Africa, it's a tribe in Africa that's very studied in terms of their gut microflora. And what we know about them is that they eat a diet that's very nourishing for a really strong, healthy gut microbiome, right? And so they're not eating fermented foods on a regular basis, but they're not taking probiotics at all. What's really affecting their microflora and their microbiome is all the food they eat and the way they live. They don't live extremely sanitary lifestyle. In fact, the hunters of the tribe, when they go out and hunt, after they butcher up the animal and they have their hands covered in blood, they cut open it's usually some sort of antelope. They cut open their stomach and their intestines, and they pull out the grass that's being digested, and they wipe all the blood off of their hands with that. They're literally using all the microflora from inside that animal to disinfect their hands, because there's all this lactic acid in there.
Wow.
That's produced by the microorganisms. They're using almost like nature's hand sanitizer. I'm not telling anybody, this is my suggestion, is not go out and do that. You don't need to do that. However, it fits within their lifestyle. And then they go home, they grab up all this meat, they lug it home, they all come back, they give each other hugs and kisses, and they touch everybody with all of those bacteria. Now everybody has just been re-inoculated with all these bacteria. And then when they eat their dinner, it's going to get into their system. So it's really profound. Their interaction with bacteria, their interaction with the way that they keep things clean-ish, right? And the foods that they eat a ton of foods that feed the right bacteria. So they aren't taking antibiotics. They haven't had to re-inoculate their systems. So in an ultimate world, an ultimate situation, we're talking about a relationship to the food around you, to nature around you, that is so interrelated, so connected, that there isn't this need to continually supplement.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an extreme.
Yeah, but it's fascinating. I mean, it truly is. And it's, I'm married to a family who they're not like the extreme clean people. And, they kind of, my husband, I'm like, did you wash your hands? I didn't even hear the water turn on. I'm like that kind of person. So when my boys, and I call them my boys, but my husband and my son head out to camp, I'm like, do you have your soap? Do you have your wet, you're going out in the middle of the country, out at the creek. And he's like, there's a creek right there. I'm like, okay. So I just let it go. Right. So they think like that, but it's very hard for most people today to think about not being as sanitary, you know what I mean? Not overwashing our hands, not being so careful, because we have so many threats in our environment these days. The MRSA and being resistant to so many things, and the flu, and everyone just getting sick all the time. How do you talk to clients about not so much not being so clean? I don't know what the word is for that, but not being so fearful of the world around us. Is there a way to educate our clients in that way?
Yeah, I think of it in terms of what I call the bioterrain. I did not come up with that term, but I think that the concept of the bioterrain best explains how we can approach this. So, okay, so you're a host for tons and tons of bacteria. They're your home, right? And so in terms of a healthy bioterrain, you want to create a body that is so strong and nourished that it can house and home all the bacteria that you want to be living in and on you. And you want it also to be so nourished and so strong that all your immune defenses, including all the defenses of all the probiotics, are keeping any pathogenic organisms at bay. And so that these organisms, even if the flu came near you, there was nowhere for it to implant. There was nowhere for it to grow. Everything was immediately like, hey, this doesn't belong here. You're out. And that's an ideal situation, right? Yeah. And so our entire society is currently created around the concept of the germ theory, which is something that Louis Pasteur invented, this concept of the germ theory. It means a germ flies in your nose, you get sick, right? Yeah. Okay. That is literally what all of our like cleaning and sanitary habits are based out of. That's what the health code stuff comes from, which some of these things aren't bad, but when it comes to the idea of antibiotics, that's also based off of the germ theory. There's something bad, there's a germ, you kill it, right? You kill off the offender, and that's how you get rid of the germ. So then Louis Pasteur on his deathbed, there's this big thing that he was like, I was wrong. It's not the microbe, it's the terrain. That's like his big like deathbed quote, which like people like me, we all love that. We're like, ha, he admitted it, you know?
Right before he breathed his last breath.
Exactly, right before he breathed his last breath. He's like, okay, listen guys, I've looked into this some more, I was wrong. And yet we're still basing it on a theory that he created while he was alive. And so in terms of that, the reason we know the germ theory is wrong is that if we were all of us who are here today, and everybody like listening to the recording, you know, if we were all in a room together and one person was sick, if the germ theory was true, and let's just say that person coughed on every single person, went around the person near the room, if that germ theory was true, every single person would be sick within the next week. And you know what? That's not going to happen. And we know that's not going to happen because it doesn't currently happen.
Correct.
There are people that you know that don't get the common cold when it comes around.
Right.
There are people that you know that don't really get sick hardly ever. I know a woman who's like, I haven't been sick since 1976. She's like, she is like an old lady, and she's strong, and her constitution is strong. You know, there are people like this. I've met a lot of people like this. And in general, when you read some of the literature, they say you really should only get sick once every 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, I'm guaranteed once a year. I will pick up some weird thing once a year. It's happened since my son came into the world. I have gotten one weird thing. Like I got the flu one year because I don't do the shots, of course. And I was like, what is this? What is this feeling? What is going on here? And my husband's like, I don't know, maybe it's that flu. I'm like, you know, because he was like making fun of me because I hadn't had it. But it is every year, once a year, I will get something.
Well, okay, so once a year in our culture these days is not terrible. When I was at my worst, I was getting sick 3 to 5 times a year.
Oh my gosh. Like
colds and like, you know, what my doctor, when I was younger, I was getting strep throat.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
3 times a year.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are problems, right? These are really big problems. When you think about what's possible and what people should be doing, it helps give you a gauge to look at your overall health and where you're going with it. Our culture is not set up currently to really create a lot of healthy people running around for a lot of reasons. You know, from the food to the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of issues just on a cultural level. And what we're doing as health coaches is a lot of supporting people to gain more access to information, to the right information.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yes. Yes. So tell me, so what are your thoughts when it comes, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the immune system since you were talking about that just a moment ago.
Yeah.
First of all, is it really true that the percentage of our immune system that lies in our gut is between 70 and 85%?
I believe so, yes. Okay. I mean, everything I've read, everything that I've also experienced working with my clients and myself, you know, the healthier I've gotten, the less often I get sick. And the more that I watch people focus on their gut, there's a couple things that happen. So when you have dysbiosis, meaning that there are the wrong bacteria growing in the gut, the problem is that they're creating a lot of toxins. They produce toxins. Like, these organisms are literally eating your food. They're fermenting it in their own ways, and then they're excreting toxins that your body then filters. It goes into your bloodstream. Your liver has to filter it. I mean, that's why some people have a lot of emotional disturbances, or other, like eczema or psoriasis, or all these other issues where these toxins are coming out in all different ways. So with dysbiosis, you know, it's not a fun situation, obviously, but all those toxins lead you to getting sick. I think of being sick as a toxin superhighway elimination, right? So the toxins can actually get flushed quickly out of your system through all of the mucus, or if you're, you know, having digestive upset, it's going to come out on one end either way quickly. So it does actually, it's like your body's natural response to toxicity. I don't want to go too crazy here. I don't want everybody running around going, oh, you're sick, you're toxic. That's not really what I mean. It's your body's natural response to needing to flush a bunch of toxins out in one moment. And so I've noticed, you know, when you clean up those bacteria, you get the good bacteria in and the bad bacteria out of your system. That makes a huge difference, right? So then you're not going to get sick as often because there's not as many toxins that need to be flushed out quickly. And when you have a nice, healthy coating of good bacteria throughout your large intestine primarily, they're going to protect you from having any other organisms take hold and try to grow there.
Right. Okay.
So yes, they're protecting your immune system kind of on two levels.
Right. So people with allergies and, you know, I mean, I see this all the time with, multiple clients when I was doing one-on-ones, and I would probably have 80% of them, especially in Tennessee. Don't you think that people, it's like they come into Tennessee and everyone automatically needs to be handed some Benadryl, a Sudafed, and a Kleenex. Like, Tennessee is just really potent with pollen, and I mean, people seem to have allergies at every turn. My mother-in-law could literally, she's a flight attendant and she flies all over the country, and she gets off the plane in Nashville, goes to her car, and her eyes are red and she's sniffling. So, you know, what percentage of people who are actually dealing with allergies, is it coming from an unhealthy gut? Is it coming from an overreactive immune system? Like, typically, what do you think is going on there when people have these seasonal allergies?
In my opinion, it's 100% of those people are dealing with a gut issue.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that any kind of allergy situation is connected to the gut. There's a couple different reasons that I've uncovered in my work. One is again, it's that like toxicity that's all throughout the system. Once your body gets overloaded enough, you start reacting to any foreign substance very quickly, very easily. Your body's just like, hey, we can't actually process anything else right now. Yeah. So we're done. Thank you very much. Yeah. And that is the case for most people. They have too much toxicity, and they can't handle one more like foreign agent, because the body is basically, your immune system it's overactive. Because for most people, when I say it's the gut, most of those people are dealing with some level of intestinal permeability or leaky gut. Mm-hmm. So their immune system is overactive because, and anybody put any questions in the chat box, if anything I'm talking about, if I need to go deeper with it. But, you know, a lot of people are dealing with intestinal permeability issues, which means that some of the food substances are going into the bloodstream, and your immune system is tagging those with antibodies and saying, this shouldn't be here. We need to attack it. We need to get rid of it. So your immune system is actually totally preoccupied with just handling all the food stuff that's coming into the bloodstream and trying to get rid of it. So then you bring that stuff in through pollen and through these other things, and your body really is overwhelmed. The other issue I see in terms of allergies is something that I really dealt with, which is something to do with histamine. I'm not totally at the bottom of this yet. I'm still really trying to do some research here. But what I have found is that there is a certain subset of people that when they are reacting to environmental allergies, they're having a normal histamine reaction, but they're also having an inability to process histamine in other areas too. So they're eating foods that have a lot of histamine in it, and their body isn't able to process all the histamine that's up in their system all the time. So it might be a genetic thing.
I was just going to say, is that something to do with the DAO enzyme or something like that?
It is the DAO enzyme, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It is.
Can you explain that a little bit so they can kind of understand what that means?
Well, so that's just basically that's the enzyme that breaks down histamine, and you have H1 and H2 receptors that are histamine receptors. H1 are a lot of the receptors that you're going to see like in your nose and eyes that like cause, or in your skin, like that cause a histamine reaction: hives, watery eyes, red eyes, your nose running, swelling, things like that. That like the same thing that happens when you get bit by any kind of poisonous insect. That's an H1 receptor that's being stimulated. It releases histamine. It tells your body to bring a lot of, white blood cells and a lot of fluids over here, and we're going to flush and handle and package up this toxin, get rid of it, move it on out. That's the body's idea, right? And so then we also have H2 receptors in our stomachs. And those receptors, when triggered, also they're in our mast cells. So they actually produce hydrochloric acid and histamine. So a lot of histamine people, I find, are going to have gurgly stomachs. They're going to also have a lot of the H1 stuff, like the hives and things like that. But they're also going to get headaches, food cravings, insatiable hunger, acid reflux, things like that. So they have this other kind of reaction that they're not quite sure of. And that is still a histamine issue. And those people often have allergies as well. So it's kind of this, it's more of an H2 style histamine issue. And then they usually don't have the ability to break down enough histamine. So your body should be able to handle some amount of histamine all the time. It's a normal part of your everyday functioning. Right. Your body's just dealing with it. But some people it's out of whack. And the part where it's out of whack, I'm seeing potentially that there are some organisms in the gut that produce histamine. Mm-hmm. So they're actually getting over inundated with histamine from all areas.
Okay. So it's like that, isn't it called also mast cell activation?
Yes, it is. Mastocytosis is what like an advanced version of that would be.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yep. Basically those mast cells start like degranulating and releasing the histamine.
Right. So let's just put this into a client perspective for the coaches. Yeah. So they have a client that comes to them and some of their, and let me say this, Natalia, I see your question and I'll be sure to ask her in just a moment. But, we're seeing clients that come to us, and by the time they get to us, as you know, they've run the gamut. They've been told they have this, take this, do this. But in their list of symptoms, which to me, I always tell people this is what I believe. I believe that that your diagnosis most of the time is a symptom. You're being diagnosed with a symptom. So if you don't get to the why of that symptom, like what is the reason you're having allergies? What is the reason that you're having skin eruptions or whatever, right? Because those are symptoms of something bigger. So when someone comes to us and they have allergies and they have diarrhea or constipation, they've got rosacea or itchiness or depression, bags, black circles, endocrine disruption, all of that. One of the main questions that coaches always say is, when someone is this complex and has this many problems, where do you begin? Besides, of course, working on, removing the reasons that, removing those roadblocks like gluten and all of that. But how do you even begin to break it down for them? Like to say, well, we're going to work on this part of the gut that's going to focus on this. How would you begin with someone with those complexities?
I mean, honestly, I've gotten to the point in my practice where I send a lot of people into my gut rebuilding program, first of all. And what I do there is I actually start with the list of foods that I call the more list, and the list of foods that's the less list. And so I don't tell people first and foremost, stop gluten, stop sugar, stop all the good things that you like, stop everything. Like most people aren't going to stick with their program if that's what you say out of the gate.
Right.
And here's the worst part. If they stop those things and they're still having symptoms, they're not going to trust you and want to keep working with you.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because and this is one of the things that I've kind of been the black sheep in a lot of discussions in the coaching groups and things, is that I know, to me, when you add that much stress to someone by taking away everything they love and everything they're used to, and you tell them, okay, for the next 30 days you can't have this, this, and this, you're just creating more stress in the gut. And then of course, what do we not want to do when we're stressed out? We don't digest, we don't procreate. So to me, it's important to take baby steps with those types of things. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. Yeah.
Well, and I think of power moves. That's what I think of it. I'm like, with each client that comes my way, I'm like, what are the first 3 things that we could do together that would get them results, that would get them feeling better, so that they felt motivated enough to work towards taking one of these bigger steps, like maybe taking gluten out or what, like gluten to me isn't the most important thing for somebody to take out, because if they don't have the energy or wherewithal to even notice that it makes a difference, or if they don't even have the ability to stick to it for a week and then test in,
Right.
like it's pointless, and they're just going to end up feeling defeated. So I want to figure out what's a power move that I know they can be successful at. So I have things that I do with people, like with my one-on-one clients. I'll give them various herbs that I know are going to give them energy right away, or decrease their stress and help them sleep right away. Or I'll give them a really powerful supplement. Like I have a couple multivitamins that I really like, or probiotics that I really like. So that's kind of the realm I start with, is what are you going to add that's already within our cultural training, which we are all trained. I don't care who you are, unless you grew up on commune, you're trained to like take a pill and like trust that process.
Yeah.
And so even if that's an herbal option or a supplement, I'm willing to go there with people. And I have found that to be a great first step. Here's what I'm going to give you. And then they're starting to practice it. Every time they take it, they think of you. Every time they take it, they feel supported.
Right.
And so just laying that foundation. And then in my gut rebuilding program, the main first step that they do is I'm like, okay, I want you to check your pH. And I just have them do a simple pH test, saliva, urine, and this one lemon test that I do. And I'm just like, check your pH and see how acidic you are. It's not like a hard and fast science, but it does tell me a lot. It does help people to understand if they eat a plate of broccoli and they still can't get their pee alkaline, then we just know that they're not getting enough minerals in their diet, period. So it's just an easy way for them to kind of tell at home. And I have them eat, all the things you guys already know and all the things they already know, eat more vegetables. Yeah. And I have them just lower the acidic foods. I have them, think about how much coffee they're drinking. Let's think about the gluten. Let's look at all the stuff on the list. And the stuff on the less list, I'd like to get you that down to like 20%. And the stuff on the more list, I want that at 80%. And I have everybody just assess, in general, best guess, where do you think you're at now? And a lot of people are about 50-50. Most people are at 50-50 on that. And so just moving them even to 75-25 or even 60-40 provides a huge shift in their awareness of what they're eating every day in a way that doesn't feel like a struggle, because they're still conscious and making every decision for themselves. They're still in control.
Right. I love that. Yeah. And it's all about empowerment, in my opinion, and giving, making them accountable, giving them empowerment to make decisions for themselves. It's kind of like edging out the bad stuff and bringing in the good stuff as you feel able, right? So you don't feel the pressure of, I do a pantry clean out that has and I teach this to my coaches, but have your client take everything out of the pantry, and you have a little piece of paper that says safe and a piece of paper that says unsafe, just whatever word resonates for them. And everything that has, ingredients that have dyes or whatever, I give them, they have a list to go by. It goes in the unsafe pile. Everything goes that, it's good for you, goes in the safe pile, which we know isn't much in a pantry, right? Yeah. And I had a client that had a jar of olives, and that was it. That landed in the safe pile. Everything else was unsafe. And she had 2 kids and a husband. And so then, when it was over, I said, okay, now put it all back. And she was like, I don't have to throw it away. I'm like, no, we're not there. We're not there. And we may not get to that point ever, but right, I want you to be aware. What we're doing is raising awareness. These are the things that are leading me towards sickness. And this is the thing should be things, the thing that's leading me towards health. So it's really just an awareness practice, and allows them to learn how to read labels in their own home and not have to go to the grocery store and try to figure it out. So,
well, and imagine if you had asked her to throw all that away. And imagine her husband's response and her kid's response and even her own visceral response walking in there to get a snack or something to eat.
Yep.
The immediate responses of scarcity and starvation, oh my gosh, there's nothing to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. That and the fact that, and then the overwhelm of how am I going to get my kids to eat anything? I don't have anything in here that appeals to them. Yeah. She still talks about that today. That was like 4 years ago, and we're now good friends. And she's like, every time I open my pantry, I think about that day, but she came back to me for a couple tune-ups after that, I need a little bit more help getting back online. And people will come back to you when they trust that you're doing something that doesn't make them feel stressed out. Right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you want me to answer Natalia's question? Okay, so I'm just going to read it out loud. It says, I know you touched on it a little bit, but can you tell us more about histamine intolerance and fermented foods? Is it possible to build tolerance to fermented foods without triggering the histamine response and eventually be able to heal and incorporate fermented foods into a daily diet? I haven't been able to do that, and I get stomach pain and super bloat when I eat even a little bit of ferments. So yeah, I mean, that is really a great question, because I developed a really adverse reaction to fermented foods because I was eating so many of them. Wow. You know, and so I reached a point where I actually couldn't eat any for a period of time. And I now teach a class. It's included in my gut rebuilding program, and I also sell it as an intensive separately. And it's a histamine intolerance intensive. And so I talk a lot about that. And I teach people how to do what I call the low microbe diet. It's similar to Gabriel Cousins' Rainbow Green Live Food Cuisine, like kind of his phases, but I tweaked it, I adjusted it actually, because if you followed his, you would be eating like 200 grams of fat every day, and I don't know anybody who can digest that, but we tweak it, and I just kind of create a plan. I mean, it was really inspired by that, and it worked really well for me, and it works for people. I have people who email me at least once a week being like, I just did your low microbe diet, and I have my histamine levels are way down, I feel awesome. So that's what I do for histamine. And then yes, you can tolerate fermented foods. So really, you have to think of histamine intolerance more as a bucket full of histamine, and it's overflowing. And that's when you're seeing the symptoms. And really, you need to lower it down here so that you have a lot of wiggle room. And, you know, some people are kind of addicted to the histamine cycle. It's a very stimulating experience.
Really?
And yes, and so people, if you look at people who are histamine intolerant, a lot of times their favorite foods are all the foods on the high histamine list.
Okay. So
like
what are
bacon, avocado, sauerkraut, chocolate, coffee, like wine. So like all these kind of stimulating foods that we're all like, yum. I really do think there's a stimulating factor to that histamine experience, but for some people it's just too much, and it's putting their whole system into a tailspin. So yes, you can reverse it. I reversed mine for like something like 7 or 8 years with no issue for 7 or 8 years, and then went kind of crazy on the histamine foods, like really, really crazy, was eating only histamine foods, and noticed kind of a flare up come back up, and I had to take some steps to resolve that again.
Okay, so what does a flare up look like? Is it different for everyone beyond, you know, we think histamine, we think itch, but that's not necessarily true. There's a list of responses, if I remember, like from the low histamine chef, that's a mile long. So what are some really common responses that people that have a problem with histamines might have?
I mean, my biggest issue was that I was dealing with like it's this insatiable hunger and like gurgling stomach. That's my main one. Maybe some headaches, and irritability. Mm-hmm. And honestly, like, do they call them like what do they call it? Histo rage or something? And I really could relate to that when I learned that that's possibly what triggered some of my kind of like adult temper tantrums, where I was just like so physically uncomfortable that it was sort of coming out emotionally. Okay. Somebody wrote on here constant sneezing. Yes, that's a big one. And then again, environmental allergies coming back. So thinking that you had resolved your environmental allergies, which I did for years, and then seeing those creep back, and I was like, oh, interesting.
It's almost like I see it when you were talking about this earlier about the histamines, about the reactions in the gut, and how we have. It's almost like we have soldiers in there, and when we're constantly eating things that we're not allowed to, or we're not able to digest, or that aren't working for our bodies, then we bring in another enemy, like, you know, the outside world, or toxic sprays, or the neighbor's weed spray or fertilizer. It's like, we're busy in here, we can't manage that right now, and then you just like overreact, like you have no soldiers left to fight those things. So then the reaction becomes bigger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm knocking on wood or whatever I can, but I remember when I got pregnant, that is what happened to me. Is I literally woke up the next day, and I'd never had an allergy in my whole life, never had an itchy nose, a runny, itchy, nothing. and I was pregnant, and I woke up and I couldn't even see. My eyes were swollen shut. My nose was itching. My face was like, my nose was like a siphon. I was like, I just need to put a cup right here. What is going on with me? And my husband's like, that's an allergy. I'm like, why is it happening now? But what was happening, obviously, was eating donuts and grapefruit and all kinds of other things I shouldn't. But my body was working so hard to support this baby, and I wasn't supporting myself the way that I should, that these allergies came out of nowhere. I mean, I knew that 4 years later, but I didn't know that at the time, you know?
For sure.
I thought that was fascinating, and I haven't had them since. So anyway, yeah, so there's some more questions. You want to take a look at those?
Yeah, I see one on here that says, I thought this was really interesting, actually. So if I can't tolerate bone broth, does that mean I have a low tolerance for histamines and have gut issues? I make bone broth and have 1 or 2 cups, and it gives me a 5-day screaming migraine. That's what Veronica said. Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of people who have done GAPS and were not able to do it because they had too many reactions from the GAPS diet. The majority of the time, it's a histamine issue. Yeah. And you'll just find it's, you know, again, I'm still trying to really get clear about the root cause of histamine issues. I'm not 100% clear because I do think that there's a gut microbe issue. And then there's this mast cell issue, and there's this enzyme issue, and potentially a genetic issue. So there's multiple places where it could be playing out, and I'm not 100% clear where's the root cause here.
Yeah.
So I'm just leaving you guys with my open-ended question as well, but I'm exploring it. I mean, I'm like reaching out to people. I'm doing some interviews with professionals, and I've been doing some testing on my own and with some of my clients, some cortisol, intestinal permeability, and histamine testing, because I'm really curious to see how this is playing out for folks.
Yeah. So let's go back to the leaky gut thing.
Okay.
Because even the words leaky gut, like I've got like fatigue on it. I'm so tired of everything being attributed to leaky gut, you know. Now that it's also becoming more acceptable mainstream, you know, because we've gone over the years, conventional doctors have always said it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. Now it's not more mainstream. Let me just say that a little bit more understanding around leaky gut in conventional medicine. Now that there's more of that, you know, how much of the problems we're seeing are actually attributed to leaky gut? Is that the first place we can run to?
So I've never really talked too much about leaky gut because the term bothers me a little bit. Mm-hmm. I say it here and there. I mean, I discuss it, but I'm not all like, hey, all the leaky gut people come over here. Here's why, because it's not a lot of people are actually getting tested for leaky gut. I mean, they really aren't. Like, I don't know very many doctors. I don't know, but maybe like 2 doctors that would even go offer an intestinal permeability test for leaky gut.
Right.
So it's one of those things where it's so self-diagnosed and over-diagnosed by practitioners galore that I tend to have reactions to moments like that where I kind of step back and go, okay, you guys can go to your leaky gut party, and I'm going to hang out over here and keep helping people rebuild their gut. Yeah. You know, because leaky gut, you can't see it. I really struggle with like making a diagnosis, even if it's like a layman's diagnosis, when we don't know for sure and we can't see it. Right. Because I could have attributed a lot of my stuff to leaky gut. I mean, a lot of the symptoms are the same, but if I hadn't stumbled upon the histamine piece, I would have never gotten through that with leaky gut protocol. But it was when I discovered the histamine piece that it made all the difference. So, I mean, and that's true for all my clients. It's not that they're all going to find a histamine thing. It might be another thing, a parasite issue, or just that they need to rebalance their gut in general, or that their mineral stores are so down, or their hydrochloric acid is so low from stress and all these other things that they're literally throwing off a pH everywhere, and probiotics can't even live in their large intestine if they you know, came in, cut them open, and dumped them all in there, right? Like, there's all sorts of other like issues similar to histamine that it could be for each person. Leaky gut, I just have some critique there because people are overusing it. They're doctors and practitioners and like natural practitioners alike are constantly telling people they have leaky gut with absolutely no evidence other than the symptoms. And those same symptoms are the same as a lot of other issues. So that's my beef with it. You know, I bring it up a little bit here and there in my marketing because I still think that gut rebuilding is going to help people who are in that world. But for the most part, I think about it in terms of, you know, Dr. Tom O'Brien actually talked about this with me recently. He has a book called The Autoimmunity Fix. Mm-hmm. And so if you guys haven't read it, I do recommend it because his stories are really great. It's really well written. And the one thing that he talks about in there is intestinal permeability and how you are in a constant flux of intestinal permeability. Your intestines are permeable. That's how you're getting your food.
Right.
You're absorbing nutrients because your intestines are permeable. So that was a really profound, so actually it's accurate to tell everybody they have leaky gut.
Yeah.
Because you do. But like, you know, I understand what it means. It's like saying that actually it's leaking worse than it should. But ultimately, I think that's a really important understanding. Well, what's causing more increased intestinal permeability? What's causing it to the point where now there are various molecules going into the bloodstream that now the immune system is tagging and being overworked from all of that.
Right. It's almost like when I hear it, I almost do like the eye roll. I'm like, oh, here we go. You know, it's almost like the like how everybody was doctors were. It's like a wastebasket diagnosis. You can't prove that it's fibromyalgia, but unless we poke on these spots. Well, if you poke hard enough, anyone's going to hurt there. You know what I mean? And it's the same with leaky gut. If you look at enough symptoms, it could all be attributed to that, but it could also be attributed to this, and this. I mean, that's kind of how I see it as well. I mean, I think it's important to understand tight junctions and how we can be affected, but I don't think it's the focus on people getting well.
Well, and it's whoa, okay. There. We'll turn this down a little bit. You hear that echo?
Uh-uh.
Oh. Okay. I think it's also an issue where, as a health coach, you have to be careful because you don't necessarily have the ability to go get somebody to take one of these tests. Okay, are you guys hearing the echo too? Okay. I think tell me if it's gotten better because I think it got a little bit better. Okay, phew. All right, good. Yeah, so as health coaches, I think it's tricky because you can't just say, hey, everybody, you know, go take this test, You know, you're not actually able to, you know, get that. You can't order tests. Right. You can ask somebody to go to the doctor and take a test. You can give them information about tests that might be good for them to take. You can send them to direct labs and say, hey, here's some tests that might be good. And you can look at their test results, but again, you cannot make diagnoses from those results. You actually have to be really careful the moment that you're looking at somebody's test to make sure that they have signed a disclaimer. They need to have signed a contract with you that says that you're, you know, no, because that's a strong line. As a health coach, the second that you start looking at tests, you're on borderline out of your scope of practice. I look at people's tests, even as an herbalist and a health coach, because I'm still trying to learn a lot here, and because there are certain things that I can tell. Like there's some really high level things that I can tell. Like if their test shows that they don't have candida, that's really helpful for me because then I'm like, great, let's talk more about just general dysbiosis, right? I can kind of see where they need to make some improvements in terms of the probiotics that they're taking or the foods that they're eating. I've been able to make recommendations to some of my clients about having too high fat diet by seeing what kind of bacteria are going in their gut. But, you know, I take a lot of precautions and a lot of steps before I do that. Yeah. And if there is inflammation or other issues showing up on those tests, I almost always refer out, as well as like, I'll be like, you know, I'm happy to do more consultations with you about this. And, you know, there are things on here that I don't totally understand, and it's not my job to understand, and I refer them out all the time.
Yeah.
And those people will come back to me and we'll keep working together, but I will refer out anytime I'm like, well, this is starting to look really complicated. Or if it's just like there's too many moving parts.
Yep.
If they've gone through gut rebuild, if they do a test and then they go through gut rebuilding and things either get worse or don't really improve, at that point I'm like, we're referring you out. because it only happens to a very small number of people, because it really is addressing, people to heal their bodies at a root level, right? We're talking about the food we eat. We're talking about how to clean it up, how to eat in a traditional way, how to not be stressed out, emotional detox, like all of these basics combined with a focus on watch your gut get better as you do this, right? So you're only looking at one thing, but once they've gone through that, if there's any kind of hiccups along the way, I'm referring out.
So that leads me to, and we're getting up on the hour here, but that leads me to a couple things. First, just so you know, like I do teach health coaches how to navigate the lab thing.
Good.
So how to get online, with their client, or be with their client with the labs, and give them tools to do their own searching about their labs, learn how to read their own labs. I'm just giving them the tools to figure that out for themselves. So we definitely talk about where we belong in that process. That's coming up in weeks 8 or 7, 6, I don't remember. Anyway, on the schedule, but that is a big part of the modules that I teach. The other thing is that, so here's a question. Client pays me, let me just say they pay me $275 to do a one-off consultation with them. I see through their intake form that they're a mess. They've got symptoms of all kinds of things that I know point back to the gut, right? So what I would do if I saw that is I would refer them to take your gut rebuilding program. That would be where I would send them, because I don't want to, first of all, reinvent the wheel. Second of all, I don't know anything beyond, the normal health coach knowledge, maybe a little more, but about what we need to be well. So when we do something like that, what do you think do you think it takes away the credibility from a coach to send a client out? Like you refer to doctors, do you think it takes the credibility away from us to send them to a program like yours to work on rebuilding their gut and work on those pieces? Or do you think that gives us I think it kind of makes us look even better, like more of an expert that says, listen, this is out of my area, but I have something that's going to work for you or could work for you, right?
I think it's better. The reason, it depends on who you're referring to and what kinds of programs they have, I think.
Yeah.
Because for me, I don't really do a lot of one-on-one. It's just not my thing. It's just like every once in a while with people who super resonate with me in the group, I'll just be like, hey, we need to work one-on-one. It's just not that often. So my program, it's a group program, it's educational. They have a community that they can learn about this information with. And I'm pretty high touch with them. Like I do have them fill out health evals. I go in there during the group calls where we're asking questions. I'm looking at people's health evals and answering questions based on what they've submitted and things like that. And then once they go through it, they have that information. They can keep utilizing that. But it absolutely, at that point, they can go back and work with whoever they're working with. And the reason I think it works is because depending on your specialty, if your specialty isn't, gut rebuilding, if it isn't gut health, it's going to be a natural fit for them to go clean up the gut stuff and then come back to you and keep working on hormones or keep working on even just one-on-one coaching or coaching habits or whatever it is that needs to change in the rest of their lives. Sometimes people really need to work with somebody for a few years to just have that support person in their life. Yeah. And that cannot be underestimated, how important it can be for a person to just show up. You're there. You might be talking about food the whole time, so you think.
Right.
So you think.
So yeah, because what I actually practice is a 3-month approach, but I have had people come back after a year or so and say, hey, my husband left me, I need some help and things like that. Having that relationship is really, really important and powerful for people. Almost like they look at you like that sounding wall or someone that they can always return to, just like a touch point, and know that you're always there. Because there's been some really complex clients I've gotten that have had such messes in their gut that I have not ever had, and I wish I had known about. The rebuilding program is launching, is that right? Or has launched?
Yeah, it's an evergreen program at this point. It's actually really easy. If people go to gutrebuilding.com, you can take a webinar called the 3 mistakes, 3 major mistakes most people make when trying to fix their gut. Yeah. And any of you can get an affiliate link for this. And literally, if you can just send people to that webinar, if they sign up for the program, you do get a referral fee. And that's just, it's all totally automated. We have it all figured out. The reason I generally recommend to doctors for gut issues is because at that point it's pretty complex and that's where they need to go. But if somebody comes to me and PCOS is their issue, I have a PCOS coach that I'm always going to send them to. If they have thyroid issues, I have a couple different thyroid coaches.
Yep.
Like, I do have my other coaches that I'm recommending and referring to based on their specialties, and they refer back, and like, we're like back and forth.
It's all about collaboration in my opinion. And that's one of the reasons I went to Mindshare, is because, you know, I wanted to find a way to better collaborate and share resources with coaches. And what better way to do that than go out and meet all of you guys, right? So,
Can I say one more thing about it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think in terms of competition, I remember the beginning of this, I was too afraid to say to people like, hey, go over there. Like, I actually was afraid at first that I would be losing clients.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I didn't do it. And at the point where I felt ready to do it was the point where I actually felt confident enough in my materials and my delivery and my support team to help all my clients, where my customer experience, once I knew that my customer experience was dialed in and that the programs were really engaged, that was the moment where I felt like I could do this, because I actually didn't feel embarrassed for them to send people to me. And that ultimately, I thought it was about competition with them. And I realized later, no, it was about feeling good enough about my own work and what I'm offering up, so that I felt comfortable with people coming in.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. But I have to say that is kind of what I went through too. I built a program for a little over 3 years. And then the minute I knew that I had something that was, going to change coaching, I was like, game on, I'm ready to go. Let's go. I'm ready. So let's go to the questions and then we'll wrap up. But let's see here. First, let me answer Mary Louise real quick. Do I call my pantry approach something other than a pantry clean out? Back when I was doing the one-on-ones and going to people's houses and doing all that, I called it a clean out. You can change it, as you guys know, and anything that you get from me that is a template or a program, you can change it and call it whatever you want. Pantry shopping or food shopping in your pantry or whatever you want to do. So I'm not married to the title. It's just something I used 6 years ago. So I'll let you take over and look at Veronica's question here, Summer.
Yep. I was also given some kefir grains the other day and made my first kefir with coconut milk. Yesterday I drank about a half a cup and immediately got a stomach ache. I thought maybe I did something wrong, but this could mean something to do with your gut. Yeah, it very well could. Here's the thing. Because people know that fermented foods are good for them, everybody's trying to go out and eat them all. And even though I think they're good for people, and I think a lot of people should be eating them, it doesn't mean everybody can. And I think of it as, it's okay to eat a little bit. I'll just put it that way. It's okay, especially if somebody has histamine issues. It's okay to just be getting your probiotics from a supplement source for a period of time. It's okay to be on a low microbe diet where you're not having any come in. Guess what? The microorganisms are still going to grow in your gut when you're feeding them the right foods. So it's not to worry that you're going to be missing out on these probiotics if you're not getting it from a fermented food source. However, if that's the case, you have to make sure you're feeding your body the right foods that those bacteria can eat. So you do have to be paying attention to it somehow, but don't get worried if it's not working for you with fermented foods. And if you are having reactions to fermented foods, take them out. You do not want to be having reactions to any foods. If any foods are causing issues for you, you should take it out of your diet so that you're not creating more work for all of your organs. You have to give your body a break. You have to create enough wiggle room and a good, healthy state of rest and restore so your body can actually get to a good place to where it's like doing its own healing work, essentially.
Right.
So, yeah, more work might need to be done there with the histamine. I might look at the histamine issues for that one. And some people I tell if they can tolerate even like a half teaspoon of kefir a day, maybe start there. If you're not seeing an issue there, maybe start there. But it's a lot of factors. It could be histamine for you. It could be HCl. It could be overgrowth of some other organism in your stomach. I mean, we don't know what it is exactly. This is a lot of stuff inside of you that we can't see. Right. So if fermented foods are not the right first step, then I always tell people go back to the original first step, which is healthy foods.
Right. So the reaction, let me ask you, this is something I wanted to get some clarity on also, because I've heard, this is what I've always heard and what I say, it may change after you speak, but now we know that an allergy and an intolerance are two different things, obviously, when it comes to food. I mean, food allergies and intolerances, I've heard. Allergies are things that you need EpiPen for, you have a severe reaction to, hives, swelling, redness, flushing, all of those types of things. Intolerances are things that can develop over a time frame of 3 days to 72 hours to be on the lookout for. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, but you're still going to have, like with histamine issues, you can still have low level allergies that don't require an EpiPen, you know, like all the other symptoms that you said. They don't necessarily require the EpiPen.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to see. And is it a 3-day time frame though that you can look for, you can expect a reaction from a food?
You know, not necessarily, because it really, okay, so when we're talking about intestinal permeability, if somebody is, you know, eating gluten, for example, you could develop issues over the course of 8 months if all of a sudden you're getting more and more stressed out during that entire time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not handling your stress levels, you could actually be getting worse. So whether it's a true intolerance or not, it's a whole bunch of systems and a whole bunch of moving parts working together.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah, I think I'm wondering, like, if someone, like, for example, when I went to Texas a couple of weeks ago, and, you know, I mean, if you've ever been to Austin, Texas, and you're on a bike and you're like, oh, it's a food truck, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always said, what do you offer that's gluten-free? And, of course, they're like, oh, well, you can have this or this. And you eat it, and you're kind of underneath the surface going, was it really gluten-free? Was it? It is a truck, right? And then, you know, I was waiting like for the 3 days following the food truck experience for anything to happen, you know? And so I guess I'm more asking, like, if you are actually avoiding specific things and then you get into something your body can't tolerate, is there that window of time?
Yes. Okay, I think the reason I'm having a difficult time with this question is because I think about it in terms, my whole approach is that your goal isn't to like create a restricted diet and work around that restricted diet your whole life. With certain, if you're having an issue with the food, I don't care what the issue is. I don't care if it makes your eye twitch or your nose run or your big toe swell up or, you know, you get a lot of gas. I don't care what the reaction is. You shouldn't eat that food until you've healed your digestion enough, until you've made your digestion strong enough and handled your stress levels enough and like really fixed a lot of the things that aren't working in your health and in your life altogether. At that point, a lot of people they find they can actually tolerate a much bigger list of foods.
Right.
And so I guess for me, it's just the framework is, you know, your ability to tolerate a food is not just dependent upon that food.
Right.
It's not about just avoiding that food. It's about your overall vitality.
Right. Right.
So that's what I really want people to keep in mind, like not working towards keeping a restriction list, but work towards going, okay, how do we move past these restrictions?
Right.
You know, there's a few, you know, are you familiar with Susan Pierce Thompson's work, Bright Line Eating?
Yep.
I love her work.
Yeah.
She has this whole concept of bright lines. And I highly recommend that approach for people. And so there are some bright lines. A bright line is a very clear line that you're not going to cross. And I think there can be some, like I think for some people, gluten is always going to be a bright line.
Right.
I would rather think about certain things in terms of bright lines than overall food restrictions that you're worrying about all the time,
Yes.
because that in itself creates more stress.
Yes, I agree.
That process of going to that food truck and then having to worry, oh my God, for 3 days, am I going to have a reaction? It's like, we have to figure out a way to actually get people's bodies strong enough to where they could tolerate going to that food truck and not having a reaction because it's within the context of a very healthy body that has a ton of wiggle room.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Now, I mean, I over exaggerate when I say I worried. I was like, well,
but people do.
Happen, you know. I mean, we ate for 5 days at places that I probably wouldn't step foot in my local town. And I was like, whatever, you know, whatever's going to happen. And my son got a bit of a stomach ache, but overall we came home and we were like, man, we pretty much rocked that vacation for the most part, eating, you know, and having a good time. And in the
I think it's a great example, though. People worry about that. I mean, and that's a reality for people who are struggling with reactions.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, we have one more question, then we'll go ahead and wrap up. But Mary Louise is asking, did you say you have them fill out healthy vows? What is that?
Oh, health evals.
Oh, evals. I'm like, wait, that sounds like a good idea. What's your vow?
I love a healthy vow. Let's use some healthy vows, folks. Great idea. Health evaluations. So they go to summerbock.com/health-eval to fill out my health evaluation.
Okay. And when I do my recording note, when I put a recording in a note and put it into the course, I will have Mary Louise, I will have links to your gut rebuilding program and then also to your website so they can find you easily. Kathy is asking, did you say the low microbe diet is part of the gut rebuilding program? Yeah,
yes.
It is. Okay. In case anybody hadn't read that, that's a good point. And then Miranda says, I have a client with histamine issues now. I'm definitely referring her. She was overwhelmed with the low histamine chef site. Yes. I can see why. This sounds like a great place for her to be. Great, Miranda. I will get you a link for Summer's program as well. And I encourage everybody to watch the webinar. I watched it the other night with my feet up on my desk while I was eating my bone broth that I had made my beef soup, and it was good. You're very entertaining. You're very personable, and I just appreciate you being here and sharing your experience. And you know, I love the things that you said. I think, you know, what we're trying to do is create less stress for our clients, in my opinion, by not throwing a bunch of elimination diets at them and all these scary words and labs and, oh my God, you have this leaky gut problem. So it was really nice to hear you kind of back that idea up, that we need to take this low stress approach to helping people. You know, one of the things I like to do is I have those 5 foundations of health that I teach, and I line them up and I say, which one of these things stresses you out the least when you think about change? Is it sleep? Is it fun? Is it movement? Is it food? You know, is it stress? Like, which one of these things do you want to start with? And that's where we're going to begin. Because then we can, you know, if somebody says do the hard things first so everything seems easy, and I do the opposite. Like Deanna Minnick had asked me, she said, you're really doing things backwards from what I've ever heard, you know, and I said, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like when someone loses weight, when they're exercising and they lose weight after 2 weeks, they're like, I'm ready to go to the gym. They're ready to go back. So if we can get them to feel better even a little bit, they're ready to move forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think also that kind of ties into what Miranda said, where that client was overwhelmed by the low histamine chef site. And what I want to say to that, because I think there's something really important. I mean, she's a great resource for sure. There's a lot of people out there that are great resources that have written great books that are so freaking overwhelming that we as health coaches could barely navigate that and help our clients get through that kind of thing. And what I've realized is that ultimately that's kind of where our job lies, in helping people just sort through all the overwhelm.
Yes. Yes, that's part of that. I think I put that in my sales page for this course, to be honest with you. Is, you know, let's end the overwhelm and let's become that bridge between what's too much, and let's pick those pieces out that might be relevant for today. You know, like Datis Karazian's book, Why Isn't My Brain Working? It's 500 and something pages. When I finished that, I'm like, now I know that my brain is no longer working because I exhausted it on that book. I had to get it. I had to order it on Audible and listen to it twice to understand and follow. And yet, here we are expecting our clients to understand this stuff, right? Some people are throwing so much information at them. So yeah, great reminders and you know, good points. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is lovely.
All right. So I will get everybody, just as a reminder, you guys, I will convert the video, get everything tucked into the Facebook site and load it into your school. And I will have resources for summer there for you guys. And any questions you may have, just feel free to shoot them my way and we'll interact on Facebook, as we always do. I kind of live there with them. So yes, and everyone's saying thank you. And I appreciate you very much, Summer. And are you going to Mindshare next summer?
Of course.
Okay, well, I will see you there then, but I'm sure I'll probably see you before then.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carmen.
Appreciate you. Bye. See you later. Bye, everybody.